This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
A season, and maybe even an era, on the brink. Next on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Carter. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it. Get it. Touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Michael Spath, Brandon Brown from Wolverine Digest and WTKA-Ann in Arbor will be joining us here later in the episode. But we begin with the massacre in Madison. Now, I didn't have high hopes for the Wolverines going into this game, but it was even worse than I ever envisioned it could be. It was a systemic meltdown of Chernobyl proportions, and you can tell by how upright and forthright and honest Michigan's coaches and players, particularly Jim Harbaugh, have been in the wake of whatever that was on Saturday. You get the feeling that Jonathan Taylor would still be running if Paul Chryst allowed him to. For the first time ever, at least according to my research, and I went back a long way, even historically bad losses like the 50-14 loss to Ohio State in 1968 that led to the ushering in of the Bo Schembechler era, the loss to Oregon in 2007. Michigan trailed at the half 32-7 in that game. I could not find another game in the history of this program that Michigan trailed 28-0 at the half. At one point, it was 35-0, and folks, it wasn't that close. Michigan went the entire game without converting a single third down. They were outrushed by over 300 yards. Not they gave up 300 yards rushing. We had over 300 yards rushing on Wisconsin last year. No, we were outrushed by 300 yards. That's having your manhood taken from you. For the third game in a row, and we've only played 3 games this season, Michigan turned it over on their opening drive. I don't even know where to begin. Drew Hallett over at the Wolverine has a column out today. I've linked it on our website at the Wolverine Digest, wolverinedigest.com. We're looking at Michigan's statistical nosedive. I mean, the numbers are startling. We're not stopping anybody on defense. This is another game, another big game against a ranked opponent that, you know, when Trace McSorley's not out there on one leg, blows up Don Brown's defense in the first half and scores on its opening drive. Somebody tweeted this to me earlier today. You know, I love your show. I love your site. You were once my favorite place to go for Michigan content, but your stuff used to be a lot more fun. When does the fun Steve return? Folks, Well, first of all, let me say this to you. I'm a fan like many of you are. I know we got some rubberneckers watching right now, enjoying our futility. So hello to you. Thanks for the views. Your clicks count the same. That's why I didn't say all of you when I referenced being fans, but I'm a fan like many of you. I live and die with this team. I have, next to, my Heavenly Father and my family, there's been nothing on this earth I have loved more than the maize and blue. But I'm not responsible for the product on the field. I can only react to it. And my reaction isn't fun because the product isn't fun. And we all kind of have different coping mechanisms. For me, it's sarcasm. That's kind of how I avoid being depressed. If I didn't go to sarcasm, we probably wouldn't be doing this episode this week. I would just be like under the covers somewhere. 15 years we have waited to matter in college football again. Really matter for the right reasons. Winning championships, not because, we can't find a player's helmet, so we've got a concussion scandal. Not because we're giving tickets away with a Coke Zero. Not because we're making another coaching change, not because the new coach is a brand, but because we're claiming significant achievements on the field. We've been waiting for this for 15 years. 15 years. And it just kind of feels like, we wait all year for this season to start. And I'm resisting the temptation to think it's already over with 9 games left. I know many of you are in the same boat. I love Christmas, and Michigan is another, particularly football season's another Christmas for me. And it feels like a disappointing Christmas for a 15th year in a row. And you know what's bad? When I've got Buckeye fans sending me notes now, dude, really sorry about that. When your rivals can't even rise up or muster up a troll, but begin to pity you, that's bad. We're in a place I never thought we were going to be in year 5 under Harbaugh. In fact, I thought we would never be in this place ever under Jim Harbaugh. If Ed Orgeron and Jim Harbaugh were hired just a few days apart, who would have ever thought Ed Orgeron would end up having the better trajectory at LSU? Answer, nobody. This offense, I don't know what we're trying to do, and it's obvious the players don't either, nor that they have much confidence in it. Somehow I missed the story back in August that Bruce Feldman at The Athletic had, that Josh Gaddis was hired over a 20-minute phone call and given the offensive coordinator position at one of the top programs in the country without ever having even met the head coach or being given an interview. I don't know what to say to that. I can't envision any other industry at a successful level where that influential of a hire is made in that fashion. I don't even know what to say to that. I don't know why Shea Patterson looks lost running an offense that he ran pretty prolifically as a younger player in a tougher conference in the SEC. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why we have a 220-pound, and I love Jordan Glasgow, man, heart of a lion, but I have no idea why we have our Viper, former walk-on with his hand in the dirt and short yardage against arguably the most physically imposing offensive line in our conference. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why we are winless against top 15 teams unless we play them at the big house. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why it seems right now that the gap between us and Ohio State is bigger than it did when Jim took over. I don't know the answer to that either. We have more 4- and 5-star total commitments on our roster than Clemson, and they look like they're playing, in another dimension. We're playing like on Earth 2 while they're on Earth Prime. I don't know the answer. I don't know where our Jimmy went. I don't know where the fire is. I don't know. If I knew the answers to these questions, I probably wouldn't be doing this. I'd probably be making decisions up there in Ann Arbor. So, he was once known as Captain Comeback as a player. His ability to bring teams back in the fourth quarter, that was his nickname, particularly when he was with the Indianapolis Colts. Jim Harbaugh is going to need to be more than Captain Comeback right now. He's going to have to be Lazarus, because there's a sizable portion of this fan base that feels let down, that's asking folks like me questions like, what were they watching all fall camp? Keep in mind, last week, Shea Patterson said, quote, "We're looking to go up there and make a statement," unquote. Well, we did. Don Brown was talking about how he, quote, "can't wait." He's excited to play Wisconsin's conventional offense. Well, just imagine if he had been nervous, how bad it might have looked. I mean, the season began with our head ball coach at Big Ten Media Days calling his shot. Yeah, I'd pick us to win the Big Ten. I'd pick us first. All we heard the whole camp was optimism. You know, maybe we're learning now why Michigan was the only school that didn't let the Big Ten Network's bus tour actually watch a practice during August. They were either lying to themselves or lying to us. I don't even want to consider the third option. Like, I don't even want to consider that they watched this product in practice and then thought, yeah, that's going to be really good. That I'd rather be lied to than that. Because to me, I think that's the big question a lot of you have. Why did they pump up so much optimism and hype if this is what they had? So this week, Michigan plays Rutgers. The game's irrelevant. Winning it, fine, but beating Rutgers 56-0 or 31-10 doesn't tell us anything. You know, what we watched on Saturday is a program that looks a lot like what we thought Michigan was going to be when Jim Harbaugh took over. And instead, we're just a gimmick. Don Brown's defense, I said it last year, is a gimmick. It's an attempt to subvert the natural laws of football, basically, by overloading teams with aggression. And when you have better players than they do, it works. But when they can physically hold their water at the point of attack, or they've got, like Wisconsin can, or they've got elite athletes on the outside that you can't cover in space, like Ohio State last year, or Florida in the bowl game, well, we know the answer. There's a reason why people actually drop safeties in coverage. And you know when I knew this game was lost is on the opening drive for Wisconsin, I counted at least 3 times that I thought Michigan won at the point of attack and still couldn't hold their water and got moved for positive yardage. Like we were a MAC team. So this is a tipping point. What we saw on Saturday is either the beginning of the end of the Harbaugh era or the end of the beginning. The moment that he stared in the abyss and finally figured out how to solve the Rube Goldberg machine that is Michigan football for the last 15 years. I love Jimmy. This is hard for me to say. He's still my all-time favorite player. I want this to be successful. You know, I went to my kid's 7th grade football game last night. He's out there playing free safety wearing number 4 for Jim Harbaugh, for Des Moines Christian. It crushes me to have to point these things out. But again, we're just the fans. We don't produce the product. He does. And this product is far from the leaders at best. In fact, when I think leaders and best, I think Charles Woodson. And I think he said it best on Saturday at Fox after the game when he said that he was, quote, embarrassed. That's coming from probably your greatest living player. And if that doesn't motivate you, whatever is going on under the hood, as Urban Meyer said, his analysis that, hey, I recruited a lot of those guys. There's a lot of highly recruited players there. Way too much talent for this to be going on. Something's wrong under the hood. Well, this is the week they better find out. Because from this point forward, starting with Iowa on homecoming, you're going to face almost weekly a team that can do to you what Wisconsin just did. Embarrass you if you bring an effort to the table like that. Steve Deace here, and I just wanted to take a time out to say thank you to the hundreds of you that are supporting us right now on our Patreon page, where you get a lot of exclusive content, my picks, both in terms of prop bets and also against the straight up point spread every single week, an instant reaction podcast that we put together for you after every single Michigan game as well. So a lot of you ask us all the time and have been asking us from the beginning. I love what you guys do. How can I support what you guys are doing here with Michigan Podcast? Go to patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. And we'll thank you for rewarding us with exclusive content. And there's anywhere from $1 to a one-time gift of $25, whatever you're willing to do to support what we do here at Patreon Podcast or at Michigan Podcast via the Patreon page. We greatly appreciate you. Go Blue. And we're back here on Michigan Podcast, joined by Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor, as well as Wolverine Digest. And Michael, I had a lot of things to say here at the top of the show about what happened on Saturday and where things go from here. So I'm just going to kind of turn it over to you and sort of let you give your big picture view, and then we'll take the conversation from there. Go ahead.
Okay, well, can I start by saying that Steve Deace last week was right and Michael Spath was terribly wrong? We had this conversation a week ago about whether this was going to follow the path of what happened in the last 3 meetings between Michigan and Penn State. Michigan smokes them in 2016. Penn State uses it as a revenge game and comes back and beats them badly in 2017. Then Michigan uses it and comes back and beats them badly in 2018. And you asked me this very last week if the same thing was going to repeat itself. And I was like, no, at some point that's got to go away. And I don't think that that's really going to be a factor in this game. And, I haven't heard a lot of Wisconsin players in the aftermath talk about revenge. Maybe that was just a Chase Winovich thing. But I certainly think that they were motivated and they had a great game plan to take on the Wolverines. In terms of like big picture for Michigan, I think everybody is scratching their head right now and trying to figure out how Michigan got here, how Michigan 5 years into the Jim Harbaugh era, where even like the hardcore Harbaugh fans, the not necessarily the apologists, but the guys who are always like, hey, don't expect too much. You can't be mad about the 2017 season. Hey, even last year losing Ohio State, don't be mad about it. It seemed like everybody was on the same page coming into this year, that it's 2019, year 5 recruiting cycles, a senior quarterback, all the talent. He's made the change offensively to a spread, to Josh Gaddis, that this is the year. This is the year for Michigan. Their home schedule, we've talked so many times before about like that perfect storm, like things aligning, the stars aligning for them. Their home schedule getting Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Michigan State, all in the big house. I mean, everything was perfectly aligned. And in the third game of the year, after a bye, Michigan goes to Wisconsin and gets absolutely humiliated to the point where the all-time greatest player in Michigan football history, Charles Woodson, says on national TV that he's embarrassed right now by Michigan football. It's not good. It's really not good. And the last couple of days, Jim Harbaugh has responded and said, this is all on me. Like, point the finger at me. Like, this is my bad. And I asked this on Twitter on Tuesday if that inspired them at all, and people are sick of it. Like, no one's inspired by comments anymore. Nobody's inspired by them saying they're going to rally from this. Nobody's inspired by the fact that this is their gut check time. The gut check time was supposed to be after Ohio State last year, after the Army game this year. They were supposed to fix things in the bye week. They've got more problems today than they had when the season started. More question marks today than when the season started. I honestly, they're just not in a great place. And there's everybody's trying to figure out right now if this is the beginning of the end of the Harbaugh era, or if this is the rock bottom moment that things rally. But Steve, how many times is Michigan going to have under Harbaugh a rock bottom moment? Ohio State was supposed to be the rock bottom moment. Mm-hmm. The 2017 season was supposed to be the rock bottom moment. And here we are talking yet again about a rock bottom moment for this program. I'm off the train. I'm completely off the train. Someone asked me earlier what I would need to get back on the train. I said, right now I'm on the platform, and as the train is coming in, I'm like, holy cow, that thing's on fire. What am I supposed to do? Should I get on it? Probably not. It's on fire. So for me, what has to happen going forward here, and I'm going to write a column for Wolverine Digest the next couple of days about what Harbaugh has to do for me, is kind of the same thing that we talked about when the season began, and that's beat Ohio State and win Big Ten title. In year 5, that's to be expected. And honestly, all this talk now about people rationalizing, well, if they go 9-3 and they still lose to Ohio State, but they show that they can bounce back. No. When the season began, you said they had to beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten, and now they've gotten crushed by Wisconsin. People were trying to okay, well, what can I accept? What can I accept? Nothing. You can't accept anything less than what you started the season with, because that is what this program should be in year 5, with 5 recruiting cycles, with 5 years to implement your culture, with 5 years to establish your offense and defensive identity, 5 years to get your coaching staff in order, all those different things. So don't give me this, well, if they go 9-3, if they go 8-4, but they don't get humiliated again, I'll be okay with it. No, Michigan fans, be done with it. He's got to win. He's got to rally this team to beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten title this year.
Michael, the question I know I have gotten a lot, and I'm guessing you have too, is This season began with Coach Harbaugh calling his shot at Big Ten football media days, saying, I'd vote us in first place like the media narrowly did. Just last week, Shea Patterson said, we are looking forward to going up to Madison to, quote, make a statement, unquote. Don Brown talked about how excited and enthusiastic he was to face Wisconsin's more conventional offense. I mean, these guys have done, from the head man on down, absolutely nothing. I mean, to lower expectations, but instead to pump them up all the more. I mean, Josh Gaddis early in camp, I was concerned when Shea didn't take my calls because he was, on the golf course all the time, but he's lighting it up right now in training camp. Were they either A, lying to themselves, B, lying to us, or C, did they really look at what was going on in practice and saying, wow, this is legit? Because a lot of people are trying to figure out what it was that they were selling us compared to what we have actually seen. I mean, a quarter of the season is over. There's only 12 games. 3 of them have been played, So people are trying to figure out what were they selling us on then, given what we've actually seen? How would you answer that?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, this is one of those times where people, fans probably think that members of the media are spoiled brats that whine and complain about the same stuff over and over again. But if we had had access to practice beyond a hour-long scrimmage in the spring game, if we had had access, could we have seen with our own eyes that there were some troubling concerns for this Michigan football team? Because what you have to do instead is you have to take everything that they say, not at face value necessarily, but you don't get information from anyone that does not have a rooting interest for the University of Michigan to be successful. Like, Big Ten, when they travel through, maybe those guys are objective, but every person that I get information from, and I get information from people that I really like and trust, and they've been good with sources in the past, but they have a betting interest, a vested interest in Michigan being successful. And Jim Harbaugh has that, and Josh Gaddis has that, and the players have that. But I don't know how there was such a huge disconnect. And maybe what we saw this past week was we saw a complete and utter failure on both sides of the ball. So the defense, any progress that they seemed to make against Army and some of the plaudits that they were getting for having a job well done, maybe what we need to recognize is that the offense isn't good. They were they're struggling beyond anything we expected, and the defense isn't really that good. And so if you've got 2 units who are essentially C+ units, and they're playing each other, and you're like, wow, we're doing this and we're doing that, that's the only thing I can think of is that it disguised what they actually were. And the coaches were like, well, if our offense is moving on our defense, but our defense has some good moments, we're feeling pretty good. They overestimated what they had developed, what they had nurtured on both sides of the ball. And they were under the impression that they were better than they are, because they're not very good, at least right now. Can that change? Maybe. That's what everybody's hoping for. But right now, they are not a good football team on either side of the ball.
I know you have spoken with a lot of former players in the last few days. Can you share any common threads or themes among them with our audience here on Michigan Podcast?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, and you can read the entire article on WolverineDigest.com. The biggest thing, honestly, Steven, is this offensive identity that all the players, all the former players, even some guys that played for Jim Harbaugh talked to me about in the last 24 hours is now, I said this on the radio show on Tuesday, we all demanded this, right? We all stood up there after they lost to Ohio State and said, join the times here, play in the 21st century, play in 2018, 2019, Jim, and stop running this archaic pro-style offense that you ran at Stanford. This is not 2010 when you had Andrew Luck and you could just maul people in the Pac-12. Join the rest of the party here, because that's what's going to take. As it turned out, maybe that was the last thing that Michigan football needed, because they spent 4 years of the Jim Harbaugh era establishing this culture of physical, ground and pound, and developing an offensive line, developing running backs, putting a fullback in there when Ben Mason was actually a fullback and not just a lead runner like we saw on Saturday. They developed this culture of, we're going to overwhelm you with our physicality. Now, it didn't work against Ohio State, and that's why everybody panicked, including myself, including members of the media, including the fans, saying you had to change things. And Jim Harbaugh changed things. He turned over complete autonomy to a new offensive coordinator to get up with the times. And I think what they lost is just more than we realize. What they lost was their identity. What they lost was their culture. What they've got is a team that is divided between two philosophies, and most of these guys have been groomed, been developed in one philosophy, and they're struggling to really become that second identity. And from the top on down, from Jim Harbaugh to his coaches, to his players, from his seniors, his juniors, his sophomores, and his freshmen, the word that the one player used was a schism. He's like, you've got this, schizophrenic offense right now that doesn't know who they are and wants to be one thing and has been told for 4 years to be one thing and now is being told to be something else. And so that's where they attribute all these struggles offensively, just because they're fighting themselves, they're fighting their own instincts, they're fighting their own tendencies, and they're just not comfortable at all with the new speed and space spread offense.
It's interesting because LSU has a deeply embedded pro-style culture going back to when Nick Saban took over there originally about 15 years ago. And they actually tried to make another offensive modernization a couple of years ago. It failed. They went back. That was with Matt Canada, the old Maryland coach. They went back to the pro style. And this year they decided to try it again with somebody that used to work underneath Josh Gaddis. And Michael, they have scored more points in the first 4 games than any team in SEC history. Did you know that?
I did not know that, no.
How is it possible another program with a deeply embedded pro-style culture? LSU has had, since Matt Flynn was the quarterback of their national championship team with Les Miles, they've had one quarterback drafted in the NFL, Zach Mittenberger. And so I don't know how they have managed to make this swap, and they have like no running game. They're not running the ball at all. They're throwing the ball all over the yard. Can you venture a guess as to how it's possible they have managed to make this work and we have not?
I've watched 2 of their games. The only thing I can say is that they have an outstanding quarterback right now. And Michigan's quarterback, Shea Patterson, is really struggling in every facet. He doesn't want to run the read option. He doesn't recognize it. On their RPOs, he's often, making the wrong decision on RPOs. Until the 4th quarter of that game, he didn't trust his wide receivers to throw the ball to them downfield. He had a great throw to Ronnie Bell, but as soon as that was ruled incomplete, he seemed to go into a shell offensively like he has in previous games. And so I don't know if it's as simple as one team has a quarterback playing at an All-American level and one guy has a quarterback playing at a level that should put him on the bench. But it could be that simple. And I'd have to go down there and spend time with LSU and figure out what it is. But I will say this. That is one of the gigantic frustrations for Michigan fans, and rightfully so, is there are plenty of teams in college football that make a transition, that have new personnel come in, have new coordinators, have new quarterbacks, and there are so many of them across the landscape in 2019 that are having an easy time with this, and Michigan is not. I know Justin Fields played in a bit of a spread offense at Georgia, but he comes into Ohio State and looks like a verifiable Heisman Trophy candidate. Jalen Hurts jumps programs, has looked amazing at Oklahoma. You go down the list, and there's so many. Look at
USC, Michael. They switched. They've had a pro style offense as long as we've had. They went to an air raid. They've had to play 3 separate quarterbacks because of injuries. Okay, and they have put up 30 points in every single one of these games. Against except for BYU, and they lost that game in overtime. They put up 30 points against Utah, 30 points against Stanford. These are historically really difficult defenses in the Pac-12, and they've done it with 3 separate quarterbacks this year. Again, I think these are questions Michigan fans need to ask. How is it that USC and LSU are pulling this off with similar cultures and styles, and we look like we are literally, someone just taught us how to play football last week?
That's the $1 million question, Steve. And I don't have the answer to it. And
we can't possibly believe Clay Helton and Ed Orgeron are better football coaches than Jim Harbaugh. Can we? Maybe they are. I don't know. Maybe they are.
I mean, that's, again, and I put this on Twitter the other day, and this is the $1 million ultimate question. And a lot of responses that people trying to figure out is, how did Jim Harbaugh go from a Super Bowl appearing quarterback with 3 division titles with the San Francisco 49ers and a guy who turned Stanford into something they'd never been in their history, and a guy who was 6 inches away from playing for the Big Ten title and going to the college football playoffs in his second season at Michigan, to a guy who gets admittedly tells the media that he got outcoached for the second week in a row, first time against Army, second time against Wisconsin, said he hasn't motivated his players, says that they got out schemed, said they got out executed. Like, how is it that the guy that Michigan hired has just essentially vanished over the last 3 years? Like, where did he go, and where did his coaching prowess disappear to?
Final thing, there's going to be John Beilein comparisons, and I think you and I share a dubious distinction that perhaps the dumbest opinion we've both ever had, and we didn't even know each other at the time that we both had this opinion, is we both similarly thought John Beilein's program at Michigan had petered out, and it might be time for a change, particularly after they lost that game on a Saturday night to Ohio State in January. And then, of course, we saw that what happened after that. That team ended up winning the Big Ten tournament. The next year, they win it again and get all the way to the national championship game. Last year's team wins 30 games again and was, 1 game away from winning another Big Ten title. And so people are going to say, hey, don't make the same mistake with Jim Harbaugh that you made with John Beilein. I understand that sentiment, but we need to remember that, one of the reasons that guys like you and I were so dumb is John Beilein had already been to a Final Four and won a Big Ten championship at Michigan before that era. We thought maybe the recruiting had died and he wasn't going to be able to get it back. Jim Harbaugh has done nothing close to what John Beilein did at that juncture of his career so far at Michigan. I mean, I heard, our partner at Wolverine Digest, Brandon Brown, say on your show this morning, he really hasn't accomplished any of the goals that he had hoped he would accomplish when he became the coach here. So, there's no Final Four on the resume. There's no Big Ten championship on the resume, and another just a few years removed as there was with John Beilein. So I don't see that comparison is valid at all. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think it's valid for a different reason. I think what all of us were questioning with John Beilein was no one was questioning his ability to develop players. Nobody was questioning his ability to coach and to coach in big games, because we had seen them, beat Michigan State, which is the equivalent of Ohio State in football. We'd seen him have all the success in the NCAA tournament and go to the national championship game. What people were questioning about John Beilein was whether he was ever going to be able to do it again, because he couldn't recruit. He couldn't go out there and get the 5 and 4 stars that were going to make a big difference in putting you on like the Duke level, the North Carolina level consistently. With Jim Harbaugh, the recruiting is fine. Like, absolutely, the recruiting is fine. It's everything else. It's the coaching. It's the developing of players. It's the big game moments. It's beating your rival that he hasn't shown. He hasn't done half those things at all. He hasn't beaten his rival. He hasn't done really well in big games. The coaching part, he did well early on in his career, but then it's really fallen off. So, if it was a recruiting thing, that would be concerning, but it's a coaching thing and getting outcoached by, not just outcoached by Big Ten coaches and the best coaches in the Big Ten, but getting outcoached by Army's coaches. A year ago in that Indiana game, Indiana's offensive coaches came up with a game plan to absolutely take advantage of Michigan. And you can make the argument that Michigan got outcoached by Indiana last year. You can make the case that Michigan got outcoached. They certainly got outcoached by Notre Dame. They've been outcoached by Purdue in the past. They've been outcoached by Wisconsin. They've been outcoached by Michigan State. They've been outcoached by Penn State. They've been outcoached by, here, like just along Utah. I mean, they've been outcoached in so many games. And this is something that I said on Monday's show is, I have read so many times where Michigan players and coaches, after a game that was not supposed to be close, that turned out to be close, and said, you know what? Indiana just had a really good game plan, like a really great attacking style that, was through us, just kind of surprised us a little bit. And I have very rarely heard the other thing from the opponents and the players that have played against Michigan say, hey, yeah, we got smoked because Michigan had this great game plan. Most of the times they say like, the coaches will admit they just got more talent than us. So that's really concerning to me, is that they're getting out coached consistently. And, Don Brown is constantly saying, well, I'm going to learn from this and something's going to change. But, if you have to get schooled and you have to get checkmated without ever moving a piece on your chessboard before you say like, well, I'm going to do something different. I mean, that's not good enough. You need to be the chess master, not the novice who's going out there and getting absolutely your rear end kicked and then going, well, I'm going to learn from this and come back the following year and be better. I mean, I think Michigan fans are completely tired of hearing Don Brown say that. And I think they're tired of Jim Harbaugh not being able to showcase that he is a better coach than the people he's going up against.
Well, if you look around the country, there's a lot of coaches who at Michigan, if you gave them 5 years, could win 70% of their games, never beat Ohio State, never win the Big Ten, and never win a game away from the Big House against a top 15 team. I think there's a lot of coaches that could do that. I think almost every coach in the Big Ten could probably do that. You think Pat Fitzgerald, Jeff Brom, Kirk Ferentz, Mark D'Antonio, Ryan Day, PJ Fleck. I mean, let's just go down. Scott Frost. If we gave all those guys 5 years at Michigan, do you think they could win 70% of their games, never win the biggest game on the schedule, never win the Big Ten, and never win a game away from home against a top 15 team? Do you think they could manage at least that?
I honestly think that they could.
Yeah.
I think so many people are so burned by Rich Rod and Brady Hoke that they think that there's nobody that could come in and win 70% of their games. But as one former player told me, the way that you have to the way that you win 75% of your games is just to be more talented than 11 teams on your schedule.
Yep.
And he's like, as long as you can recruit. And he said the problem that Rich Rodriguez had was he couldn't recruit. And the problem that Brady Hoke had was that he couldn't stick to his guns, and he started letting the team walk all over him, and then they lost respect, and then there was a whole civil war.
Michael, his best team was primarily made up of Brady Hoke's recruits, the 2016 team.
So he can recruit, but other guys can recruit too. There's a lot of people that can recruit to be better than 11 teams on Michigan's schedule every year, or 10 teams on Michigan's schedule, and that's how you beat. That's how you consistently beat 8-9 teams, but you've got to be a great coach to beat the other 3 or 4.
All right, man. It sounds like you got some text or emails to return. I don't want to keep you much longer.
Or
other than that, or your TV dinner's done. One of the
You know who it is? It's that lousy, overslept Brandon Brown who's supposed to join us today.
Yes.
Who was instead texting me because he was sleeping in the library.
Yes, blame it on him. In fact, blame it on Rich Rod, like a couple of your callers were doing this morning, I heard. Still talking about it took 10 years to recover from Rich Rod. It's amazing. Penn State recovered from a child predator in about 10 minutes, but Michigan needs 10 years to recover from Rich Rodriguez. That makes sense. All right, great stuff, Michael. Good to talk to you as always, man. Take care.
All right, thanks so much.
You bet. These are exciting times at Wolverine Digest. You can see right there, we are now affiliated with Sports Illustrated. We are the official Michigan channel for SI.com. So that, of course, when you're going to be linked up with one of the great brands in all of sports, when it comes to sports media and Sports Illustrated, and you're covering one of the great brands in all of sports, the Michigan Wolverines, you need to up the ante. Now, you can see right there on our title page, myself, Michael Spath, Brandon Brown, we are bringing you loads of content each and every day. I can't even keep up all day long with the content that we are producing on a regular basis. So if you want to get all of this content, it is right now free. Everything there, all the video, audio, the podcasts, the analysis, commentary, all of it is free for you at wolverinedigest.com. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, do you still have confidence in Jim Harbaugh as Michigan football coach? By the way, this is by far the most voted on poll we have done in the history of this show. 75% of you. Wow. said no. I just, barring some form of off-field scandal, I never envisioned we'd get here. I don't even see it. Again, that's why I use sarcasm as my coping mechanism. I try to find something funny. Otherwise, man, I'm going to be in a dark place. All right, let's get to this week's question of the week. Gary Moore says, isn't Ward Manuel, Michigan's AD, fine with going 8-4? He's a true Michigan man after all. Why do so many think Harbaugh could be in trouble? Well, I've been asked this question, Gary, by some friends of mine who aren't Michigan fans, because they've heard me say Harbaugh, Michigan's never firing a coach who wins 75% of his games and doesn't have a scandal and is a proud alum because he can't beat Ohio State. Well, this is a lot different than Ohio State. As Michigan fans, we like to tell ourselves some things to make ourselves feel better. Well, Ohio State's a win-at-all-cost football factory. We're a much prouder academic institution, so losing to them, it's almost like we try to find pride in it among some of us. Now, Ohio State has greatly improved its academic standing in recent years, but those are the fictions that we are okay with. But when you start getting pantsed like this, embarrassed like this, housed like this by Wisconsin, a program that takes the dirt road, doesn't recruit nearly at your level, doesn't have nearly your tradition, although I would argue in recent years has been the better program, sure, but historically it's not even close. When that starts happening, that's now when, well, if we're not going to win pretty much all of the other games, then what are we doing here? And I think that's why this loss to Wisconsin, while not as existentially impactful as what happened last year against Ohio State because everything was on the line, this one is even worse because Michigan fans recognize and respect historically the power of Ohio State football. They view Wisconsin as an inferior historically. And if they're going to punk you like that, you can't really lie to yourself anymore. You can't tell yourself those preferred fictions anymore that make you feel better at night. Kind of brings everything out into the open, which is exactly where we are right now. I'll be fascinated to see what the student seating is at for that Rutgers game on Saturday. Hell, I'll be fascinated to see how full the stadium is as a whole. I mean, I had somebody who is a fairly well-known Michigan supporter text me after the game on Saturday telling me, quote, "This is a brand-crushing loss," unquote. So the good news is, I think Jim Harbaugh is very aware from what I've seen from him the last few days that we're at a tipping point moment right now. Now, what we don't know, the bad news is why did he let it get to this point? And the news we don't know yet is can he do something about it or not? We're going to find out. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast. Check us out each day at WolverineDigest.com. Please leave us a like and leave us a subscribe at the podcasting or YouTube, whichever platform you use to access our show. The more of those subscriptions and likes we get, the more people like you we find, and please share this with other Michigan fans you know too. Special thanks to our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast for spreading the word. Until next week, go Blue.